Alright guys, my name is MetaGoblin and today I'm going to be walking you through every single class option in the classic Burning Crusade to help you decide on what class to play. I'm going to keep this video nice and sharp to keep the video short and efficient, but if you want longer detailed videos on all the classes, you'll find a useful playlist in the description of this video. But before we jump in, a quick message from our sponsor, who is actually just me. I've recently been working with an artist called Sam Z to design some cool t-shirts for you guys. My girlfriend should be showcasing them in the background of this video. You can get them in multiple different colours and also as hoodies. If you're interested, then please check the description or the shop page on my channel. I'm going to structure this video very precisely by asking the three big questions anybody asks when choosing a class. Is it any good in PvE? Is it any good in PvP? And is it actually fun? Beginning with the Warlock, this is a top tier class for both raiding and PvP, and arguably the strongest class in the Burning Crusade in both aspects of the game. Their DPS in Shadowbolt spec is insane because Warlocks can spec down into the demonology tree to pick up the demonic sacrifice talent to benefit from an extra 15% shadow damage, which will also stack with their Shadow Priest shadow weaving talent for a total of 30% extra flat damage. Also stacks with Curse of Element and the Misery debuff that Shadow Priest provides too. Not to mention the improved Shadowbolt talent that increases your Shadowbolt damage by a further 20% on the next 4 Shadowbolt casts, which becomes extremely powerful when multiple Warlocks are applying this debuff. Essentially, Warlocks have a permanent 50% increased Shadowbolt damage from their talent alone. It's why they don't even need that much gear to do insane damage. In PvP, Warlocks can play the Siphon Life and Soul Link build, which makes them as tanky as a protection warrior but still able to pack a punch, so they are incredibly strong in arena, especially with their powerful utility. But is it any fun? So if you decide to play the Shadowbolt spec, the rotation is extremely simple. You just spam Shadowbolt for the whole expansion, which is obviously very boring. However, you do have the option to either play Fire Warlock or Affliction Warlock, which have more interesting rotations and playstyles. Affliction provides useful utility to a tank mainly, and Fire Warlock can actually deal more damage than a Shadow Warlock if there is a Fire Mage in a group instead of a Shadow Priest. Next we have the Hunter, another top tier S class in raiding but more of an average tier class in PvP. Because of a tier 3 dungeon set available to Hunters, Hunters can do ridiculous damage very early on in TBC because of their armor reduction set bonus that boosts their damage considerably. It will take a long time for you to replace this 4 set piece bonus, so you don't need to worry about getting raid loot as much as the other classes. Through the entirety of TBC they will be topping the meters in Beast Mastery spec. In PvP, most Hunters would go double Healer and Hunter to exploit the power of Viper Sting. It's more of a cheesy comp though, to be honest, since Hunters don't have the greatest maneuverability or defensive capabilities in the game, and obviously they can't do range damage in melee range or while moving until Mr. Pandaria. But is it any fun though? So unfortunately, Hunters back in TBC days created the infamous one button macro that perfectly fits your entire rotation into a spammable button to provide the optimal DPS possible for a Hunter. So depending on whether Blizzard actually hotfixed this macro, you will just be spamming one button for the entire expansion. The only other option is to play Survival spec, which is more of a raid utility spec that does less DPS. The Warrior is a top tier tanking class but a very low tier class when it comes to raiding. However, it is a top A tier class for arenas and will fit very well into a number of different comps. As a main tank, they are great for progression raiding because of their powerful cooldowns like Shield Wall and Last Stand, which the other tanks obviously don't have. However, they are not great for doing fast dungeon groups with AoE DPS because they won't be able to hold aggro against a Mage's Blizzard for instance. They can DPS as a useful support class in Arm spec, and Fury spec will provide slightly more solo DPS, but unfortunately Warriors don't start to do impressive DPS until the later tiers. So raid groups will likely only bring one DPS warrior per 25-man raid group. In PvP, however, it's not all doom and gloom because Arm spec is an incredibly powerful spec, particularly when you craft Storm Herald, which is a stun proc of 4 seconds with no diminishing returns of any other stuns. It also scales well with your DPS abilities because it's a 3.8 second speed weapon. When it comes to the Rogue, it's the same story as the Warrior, low tier DPS in raids but top tier in PvP. Raids probably won't bring more than one Rogue to a raid, as they are only there to balance the comp and provide some useful utility from time to time. In PvP, they are a gladiator earning class. They have great maneuverability, great defensive, great CC for pushing pressure and peeling, and overall an extremely fun class to play in both PvP and PvE. It's also great just being able to lockpick your way into locked dungeons. You can also gain access to the first boss room quicker in Shattered Halls by unlocking the door, and not to mention all the solo dungeon runs you can do to open chests and earn some decent gold. When it comes to a Mage, just imagine a Warlock but 10% less good. They will top DPS meters in raids, they will push Gladiator Rake in arena, but we're just a little bit behind Warlocks. They can play as every single spec since they are very balanced during the Burning Crusade. The Mage community argues a lot about which spec is best in slot. Short answer to that question, it depends on what gear you have. But overall I would say that you can easily play any spec you want and make it work. Frost is great because you can use Cold Snap and Icy Veins combo to double up on the cooldown on a single raid fight. Fire is good when you have lots of spell crit because of beefy ignite procs, and Arcane is great because you get a lot of spell hit chance from your talents for your new Arcane Blast ability, which is boosted even more by the tier 5 set bonus. In PvP, the Frost Mage has arguably the biggest toolkit. They can perform strongly in every aspect of PvP gameplay, however they are one of the highest skill ceilings out of the other classes, so be prepared to pull up your pants. Although the raid rotations are very simple for the Mage, much like a Hunter or Warlock, they are definitely slightly more interesting because they have opportunities to cast other multiple abilities, for instance cooldown timing and Fire Blast while on the move. I like to think of a Mage as a Warlock that does 10% less damage but makes up for it with portals and great capability to do AoE solo gold farming. The great thing about Paladin in TBC is that all of the specs suddenly have become viable. Protection Paladin in my opinion is the overall best tank in TBC because they are so good at holding threat in dungeon groups to allow DPS to use their AoE abilities. They can also use Exorcism to generate a lot of threat on undead and demon bosses. They also have no issues with crushing blows because of Holy Shield, unlike a warrior. Retribution is a powerful support spec, not a great DPS spec, but they do provide great AoE healing, AoE mana regeneration, and increased melee and spell crit debuff, and obviously they're useful buffs. Holy is a great healer with good mana efficiency once you get good gear, with a big toolkit of powerful defensive cooldowns. Unfortunately in PvP they're not that great, and this goes for every single spec, simply because Resto Druid and Disc Priest are better than Holy, and Warrior and Rogue are much better than Retribution, so the comps that use those better specs will simply outmatch comps of a Paladin. Protection and Ret are very fun specs to play with multiple abilities, however Holy Paladins have a much more simple healing toolkit since they will be spamming one ability most of the time. Much like the Paladin, the Enhancement and Elemental specs suddenly become viable in TBC. Elemental can easily compete with Warlock and Mage on the DPS meters early on in the expansion, but unfortunately they begin to scale badly later on in the expansion due to their gear. They also provide very useful utility for other casters in the form of Totem of Wrath that increases the party spell crit and hit chance by 3% each. Enhancement is essentially like a rogue with more useful utility. They won't provide the best personal DPS in the game, however they will more than make up for it with their buffs, like Unleashed Rage that increases the party's attack power, and Bloodlust or Heroism that boosts the party's haste by 30% for 40 seconds, which can be used multiple times in the fight, and all Shamans in fact have access to that ability. Resto is easily the best AoE healer in the game, and also great for tank healing because their healing crits increase the tank's armors by 25%, and obviously they provide all of the useful totems every Shaman provides, like Wind Fury Totem and Mana Spring Totem. Resto Shaman is one of the most fun healers to play because you don't solely focus on healing but also buffing. Enhancement has a cool and interesting rotation, and the totem twisting trick can be quite challenging. However, Elemental is the same story as the Mage, fairly simple rotation, but at least you have the opportunity to use other spells from time to time. Overall, Shaman, extremely powerful support class and very highly desired. I'll begin by talking about the Shadow Priest. This is a class I've played a lot during TBC, and the class I'll be in fact rolling in Classic TBC. Shadow Priests are probably the strongest yet rarer support classes in TBC. Their abilities such as Vampiric Touch is a dot that converts all of your shadow damage into mana regeneration for your party. The more shadow damage you do, the more mana you will give back. Also, Vampiric Embrace provides AoE healing, and you also have nasty debuffs like Shadow Vulnerability, like I mentioned before, increasing shadow damage by 15%, and Misery that increases all spell damage on the target by 5%. Holy is a very strong raid healing spec with powerful single target and AoE healing. Disc is more of a PvP healing spec because of how powerful pain suppression is. It's essentially like a mini shield wall that you can buff on your teammates. You also have Power Infusion to buff the cast speed of your Warlock or Mage. In fact, the utility kit is huge in every single spec for a Priest, although Shadow is more of a mid-tier spec when it comes to arenas, whereas Disc is a top-tier spec, particularly when you play in comps like RMP, an absolute gladiator pushing comp. I would say Shadow Spec has the most interesting rotation out of any of the other specs in the game, since you can use multiple abilities and snapshot your dots with perfect timing to push your DPS even further. I'd also say that Holy is one of the more fun specs to play, since you can provide very useful single target healing, AoE healing and clutch gameplay with abilities like Power Word Shield. So for a Druid, all of the specs are perfectly viable. Feral Bear spec is a great tanking spec with an extremely high health pool that can even soak crushing blows, also with great threat generation. Feral Cat spec is probably the strongest melee spec out of all of them when played skillfully, and also provides useful utility such as leader of a pack that provides everyone in the party with 5% extra crit. Moonkin is on the same playing field as an elemental shaman. They won't provide the best personal DPS but provide very useful utility to make up for it, such as Moonkin form that provides the party with 5% spell crit and increased hit chance debuff for the melee. And also Insect Swarm that reduces the boss's chance to hit the tank. Resto is a strong healer for both raid and tank healing. They also have decent utility like Innovate and Combat Res, which all druids in fact have. Resto really shines more in PvP as the best healer for arena. They're great at applying versatile playstyles of their various talent builds and various shapeshifting forms to counter every other class in the game. Druid is always one of the most fun classes to play in WoW, and I would confidently say that you'll have fun playing every single spec, particularly as if you get bored of one you could just try another one out. The only exception might be Moonkin, since the rotation is very simple like a Mage's, but not quite as brain dead as a Warlock's rotation. But anyway guys, I promise I'll keep this short and sweet. My name is MetaGoblin. Till my next video, ciao.